Hi everyone. I know I've said this I think for the last like 4 mini lectures, but we are really wrapping this chapter up. I'm going to break these last 4 slides into 2 different mini lectures. In this mini lecture, I'm just going to talk about the last 2 points on sort of higher functioning of the brain. So I'm going to talk about language, which is very complex, and then I'm going to talk about cerebral lateralization. And then I'm going to go to a new mini lecture to run through our cranial nerves, which I'll talk a little bit more about what you need to know for cranial nerves in that piece. So let's just do 2 slides in this little mini lecture. Shouldn't be more than 10 minutes. I say that now, it'll probably be 40. All right, let's do this. All right, so really our last higher level cognitive function I want to talk about in the brain is language. There are so many aspects to language. We have reading and writing, understanding spoken word. I didn't include it on this slide, but actually sign language is controlled and regulated and processed by the same regions of the brain that spoken language are. So anytime we are understanding communication and by way of words, so whether it's listening to them, saying them, reading them, or writing them, all of that is going to be done by sort of very specific regions in the brain. So we have 3 areas that are really involved in language and our understanding of it. The first one I have listed here is Wernicke's area. That is also going to be called the posterior speech area. Right here, so it's sort of posterior in the brain. It's this limeish green color. This is going to be primarily involved in recognition of spoken and written language. Language. It is usually only in the left hemisphere. So we don't see a ton of cases where just one of the hemispheres is responsible for a particular function. In this case, usually Wernicke's area is found only in the left hemisphere. It does get a lot of input from surrounding areas as well, so it does not operate just on its own. The second region involved in language is called Broca area or Broca's area. This is also known as the motor language area. So here's Broca's area, here's Wernicke's area. So Broca's area is going to receive formulated speech plans from our posterior speech area. And so it is also in the left hemisphere. And it generates a motor plan for muscles involved in speech. So we have our recognition of spoken language from our posterior speech area. It then sends a formulated speech plan to Broca area or to our motor language area. The motor language area is then going to generate a motor plan for the muscles of motor speech, right? So we get, I'm going to say this coming from our posterior speech area and headed towards our motor language, and then the motor language interprets that and generates a plan for actually contracting the muscles that will make you say those words. The last bit is our affective language area. The affective language area is interesting because it's actually in the right hemisphere usually. So on the opposite hemisphere of our posterior speech area and our motor language areas, and it is going to control the emotional aspect of language. So if somebody had damage to the affective speech area, their speech would be very sort of monotone and have no inflection, as we would call it. So they don't have, any sort of expression in their speech. So that actually gives us a nice leeway into our discussion of cerebral lateralization. This is also a good time for me to dispel some rumors maybe that exist about being right-brained or left-brained. There is no such thing as being dominantly right-brained or dominantly left-brained. I will give you the fact that the cerebral hemispheres are not identical to each other in structure or function, so there are differences in what the different sides are doing. That functional difference is what we call cerebral lateralization. Now, generally speaking, and this is a generalization, the left hemisphere of the brain is what we call the categorical side. It is often going to be involved in spoken and written language, as well as our sequential and analytical reasoning skills. So you can see in this image, it has some things listed as being predominantly managed by the left hemisphere. So olfaction of the right nasal cavity, verbal memory, speech, right hand motor coordination, feeling shapes with the right hand, hearing vocal sounds with the right ear, rational or symbolic thought, superior language comprehension, and vision for the right field. The right hemisphere of the brain is called called the representational hemisphere. It is most likely to be involved in integrated and holistic understanding, imagination and insight, as well as pattern and spatial perception. So olfaction for the left side, memory for shape, left hand motor control, feeling of shapes with the left hand. You'll see that these just mimic, these are just different sides of the body, right? Hearing non-vocal sounds. So the right ear has an advantage for hearing vocal sounds. The left ear has an advantage for hearing non-vocal sounds. Musical ability, intuitive or nonverbal thought, recognition of faces and spatial relationships, and then vision from the left side of the body. So cerebral lateralization is highly correlated with handedness. So for people who are right-handed, 96% of them have a left hemisphere that is categorical and a right hemisphere that is representational. The other 4% is actually switched. Left-handed people, on the other hand, have about 70% of them have this organization. 15% have the reverse, so the left would be representational and the right would be categorical, and 15% have unspecialized hemispheres. So there is difference in terms of the function typically of the two hemispheres. Again, primarily left is categorical, so we would define that as spoken or written language, and then also sequential or analytical reasoning, whereas the right hemisphere is going to be more holistic integration, imagination, and then pattern and spatial perception. Okay, so I did keep this under 10 minutes. I am going to end here, and then the last little mini lecture is going to walk us through our 12 pairs of cranial nerves.